Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Abhijit Chavda podcast. And today, as you all know, our guest is a very special author. It is Mr. Chandrachur Ghose, who is the author of a very interesting new book, Bose, the Untold Story of an Inconvenient Nationalist. He's also author of many other books, including Conundrum with Anuj Dar. So, Chandrachur, welcome to the podcast. It's great to finally get to talk to you.
Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your show. It's an honor actually. I mean, your show is so popular and so well received. It's a great feeling to be talking to your audience.
Thank you so much. It's the honor is all mine to have you with me today. So let's talk about the new book. It was released in February. Uh, so
Right.
when I heard about the fact that you're releasing this new book from Anuj Dar, which whom I've spoken to a couple of times on this podcast, so the first thing that came to my mind is why are you writing a new book? Because there are lots of other books that have been written about biographies about Subhash Bose. So were there some issues that were missing in those biographies, or were there some gaps that you have filled in this book? So what was the need to write a new book? What motivated you to do that?
Well, you see, history. I mean, I'm not a historian.
Mhm.
I'm definitely not a professional historian. So what happens is history is a progressive thing. It's a progressive subject. As and when new information keep coming in, and it keeps getting added to the body of knowledge, to the body of information. But and Suhash Bose's first biography most probably was published in 1926 or 27 when he was just 30 years old. It was written by one of his friends, and when he was in Mandalay jail at that time. So from that time till now, a lot of biographies have been written, as you correctly pointed out. And what happens is the first major biography from, uh, I won't say an objective perspective, but from definitely from somebody who had nothing to do with uh, Subhash Bose's politics or his career, was published in 1959 by a British intelligence agent called Hugh Toy. And Hugh Toy had been chasing Subhash Bose after his mysterious disappearance. And while writing, it came out, it was very clear from his writing that he started admiring Bose. And he was very bitterly attacked in the Western press for showing his admiration at certain places. Of course, he was critical also. There were many points on criticism. But overall, there was a very sympathetic and admiring tone, and which was very surprising coming from a British intelligence agent. Now, from that time till, then we have had biographies the next major biography came in 1990, which was a combined biography of Subhash Bose and his elder brother, Sarath Chandra Bose, written by an American scholar called Leonard Gordon. He wrote The Brothers Against the Raj. Now, after that, there have been, and in between, there have been books like the War of Springing Tigers, Subhash Chandra Bose, and Indian democracy, and all those kind of a lot of political, semi-political biographies have been written. And the problem with those biographies was that they were playing around with the same set of information, and there was a style adopted by Hugh Toy in 1959, which was kind of a CV style. So I call it the resume style of biography. So basically, it focuses on where you were born, what was your education, where you studied, and then what all you did. I mean, just in the style that you submit a resume when you apply for a job, you describe yourself in the way possible, and that's about it. So Leonard Gordon tried to break out of this narrative a little bit because he did uh, collect a massive amount of information because his research spanned 20 to 30 years in Bengal and a lot of primary research. But instead of helping him, that overload of information became his bane. So he could squeeze in a lot of information, but he failed to give the reader a feel of the person that Subhash Bose was. And his book was kind of summarized, and in the new book later written by Sugata Bose, who is a grand nephew of Netaji. So Sugata Bose is a Harvard professor, historian. So it was not wrong to expect a better product from him, but it was nothing more than a summary of Gordon's book with a bit of addition here and there, and nothing new. So yeah, all these biographies suffered from one simple lacuna. That was that they were very rushed. That Subhas Bose did this, Subhas Bose did that. He fought with Gandhi, he quarreled with Nehru, and went to Europe and Southeast Asia, formed two governments, formed an army, fought with this. So packed information, and the reader is rushed through as to through the happenings, and there is no space to stop, reflect, and actually kind of chew on the facts as to what exactly is happening, what is happening around him. Why is Subhas Bose behaving like this? What are his sources of ideology? What exactly is he looking at? Why is he differing so much from Gandhi and Nehru? And if he's going abroad taking help, is that good or bad? I mean, uh, there are so many interpretations which have been given on later on. So and these were the deficiencies, so to speak. But there was a more serious deficiency, and that was certain aspects of Subhash Bose's activities were completely whitewashed. They were suppressed, brushed under the carpet. So his real feelings towards the Congress party, towards the Congress leaders, his uh, networking with the revolutionary groups across the country, and to a real measure of to what extent he rose as a leader. What was his stature when you compare him to Gandhi or Nehru or Patel? What was his stature? What what was he trying to do with the help of Germany, Italy, and Japan? These kind of certain aspects of information, for whatever reason, were completely brushed under the carpet. And one of the reasons that this was done was shoddy research. Shoddy research in the sense that Sugata Bose also runs the Netaji Research Bureau, which also publishes Netaji's collected works. So the collected works of Netaji till now, I think there are about 12 volumes, and that suffers from such a deficiency. It is unbelievable. If you compare the time period, say from 1921 to 1945, the active life of Subhas Bose, and if you try to measure their output in terms of letters, articles, and which are captured basically in the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, selected works of Jawaharlal Nehru, collected works of Subhash Chandra Bose. So if you compare them, these collected works, number of pages, the number of pages for Gandhiji for this period, this 24, 25 years, 21 to 45, is more than 30,000 pages. The number of pages which can be found for this period in selected works of Jawaharlal Nehru is more than 10,000 pages. In comparison, the number of pages for Subhash Bose's collected works is just about 3,000. So it's one tenth of Gandhi, one third of Nehru. Now, Subhash Bose certainly didn't write or speak any less than the other two. So there has been some problem in collecting that information. So, keeping the entire narrative or information related to Subhash Bose within the grasp of the family has done enormous harm uh, to general awareness about Subhash Bose and about, familiarity with his work. So I started looking at contemporary newspapers, journals, both Indian and foreign. I started looking at the archives. I started looking at private collections, and a serious amount of information was already existing there. And I was astonished that why professional historians did not take help of these materials. What stopped them? Because that is their forte, that is their bread and butter. That's what they were supposed to do. But there was this deficiency in almost all the works. And there was another thing that came up which helped us a lot which we did not really expect this line of development. That because of our transparency campaign, our campaign using the Right to Information Act from 2006, huge amount of files and documents were declassified. The first set of declassification happened in 2010, where more than 10,000 pages, because of my RTI campaign, I fought with the Home Ministry for 4 years. And as a result, for the first time, uh, responding to a private initiative, the government declassified more than 10,000 pages in 2010. And then the momentum gathered from there, because from those pages came out that Netaji's associates and family were being snooped upon by the Nehru government for the 30 years after independence. So that led to such a hue and cry that when the Narendra Modi government came to power, they declassified further 300 files. So all this body of information that came out, they contained valuable information on Netaji. Of course, most of it was related to his disappearance mystery. But even in those pages, there were a lot of materials which related to his life and work. So it was absolutely necessary to bring this together and see whether we find any new. We can see Netaji in a new light if we can interpret the man any better. And actually, that happened because the picture that came out from these pages, from the private collections, from the contemporary journals, newspapers, was a much more complete picture of Subhas Bose. So we had to kind of document it. That was I started the work in 2012, believe it or not, but then had to give it up because our Anuj and my work completely focused on the disappearance mystery, and a lot was happening there. So I really didn't get, and at that time I was a full-time employee in a. I've been a economic consultant, economic researcher consultant. I've been an environmentalist. So I was fully into that professional mode, and whatever time I used to take out, I used to focus on the disappearance part. So that idea of writing the biography had to be put on hold for a long time. But then last year, this offer came from Penguin, and I thought that this is just about time that this should be written. And there was also Abhijit, there was also this criticism from the Bose family, a section of the Bose family, that we talk, Anuj and I and Mission Netaji, we talk only about the death mystery. We sensationalize unnecessary topics, and we never bother about the ideas of Netaji, the ideals of Netaji. So we thought the reality was far from that accusation. In fact, we have been talking much more about Netaji than the Bose family, the current generation, has done collectively. So that was another challenge or an accusation that we had to respond to. So this book is another, also an answer to that accusation. So that's how it came to be.
Very interesting. So you said that there are many aspects of his life that have been totally whitewashed out by contemporary and other historians, especially Indian historians. So before I go into that, I would like to ask you, what do you mean by inconvenient nationalist? Who was he inconvenient to, and who is he still inconvenient to today?
uh, Netaji is inconvenient to all political parties.
Mhm.
And that's one reason why no government is walking that last mile to bring a closure to his disappearance mystery. Although the truth is known to everybody, but that's the biggest question everybody in everyone's mind in our country today. That why is the government, despite knowing the truth, not coming out with it, not giving an official stamp on it? Everybody knows the truth. It's not that the government doesn't know, it's not that the political leaders don't know. Most of the top level political leaders that we have been in touch with, we have spoken to, senior bureaucrats, former bureaucrats we have spoken to, they all know the truth. But big question is, why are they not telling the truth? The answer lies there, that he is an inconvenient nationalist. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, Subhas Bose, uh, compare him with his contemporary leaders. Every leader has his own constituency. Sardar Patel has his constituency. The Patels, the Gujaratis, he has his constituency. Mahatma Gandhi has his constituency of a particular sect of the Congress. They will, and even outside Congress, in so many TV debates these days, you will see that. The invocation of Bapu. How can you say this? Could you ever face Bapu? Come on, give me a break. But whatever it is, there is a constituency. Nehru similarly has a constituency. So, even if you even when you go back in the history, say for example, if you are talking about Shivaji Maharaj, he has a particular constituency. Subhash Bose never had a constituency of his own, despite his immense popularity, and that is a very striking feature of his personality, of his political activity, political life. Now, there is a saying in English that what belongs to everyone belongs to no one. Subhas Bose is a prime example of that. So he was his own man. He did not subscribe to any particular ism, political ism. His primary focus goal was to win independence for India and then reconstruction of free India. That was his sole focus. And for that, he would ally with any political group if required. For that, he would adopt tenets of different ideology if that suited his purpose. He would not be dogmatic. So he was not a communist. He was not a Hindutvavadi. He was not a Gandhian. But in his work, in his life, you will find strands of all these ideologies in his work. He was not a fascist. So, but even then, he admired certain aspects of fascism. He admired certain aspects of authoritarian rule, which cannot be denied. Now, so his approach was pragmatic. What suits national interest? So he very categorically articulated this thing that India must think of her own interest. This he articulated in 1939. And that one single line clearly shows what a far thinking person he was, because that slogan came back to India in 2013 when Narendra Modi made India first his electoral slogan. So India first. And that is what Subhash Bose had exactly said in 1939, and the Congress party did not like it at all, because they had a very nebulous, vague thing about abstract morality. Good, bad. We are Democrats and we are peaceful. So all this kind of stuff was there. So by following this line of political thinking, Subhas actually alienated or annoyed, antagonized the Gandhian bloc to begin with. His first fight was with the Gandhian bloc because he never subscribed to non-violence as a dogma. It was a strategy, a tactic to be adopted, to be utilized, to be implemented for certain goals, specific goals. But non-violence as a dogma, no, that's not going to happen. Uh, so Gandhian wing, including the senior leaders, all the Gandhian senior leaders, the group known as the Gandhian High Command. So Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel. Uh, I will keep Jawaharlal Nehru on the outside for the moment. Then Chakravarti Raja Gopalachari, Kripalani, all these people, Bhulabhai Desai, and many others, the Gandhian wing were absolutely against him. And ideologically, there could not have been a wider gap between them. Now, Subhas declared himself, he was a self-declared socialist. So that should have brought him closer to the communists and the Congress Socialist Party. But the Congress Socialist Party, as it turned out, were more Gandhian because Jayaprakash Narayan and Ramana Lohia were extremely concerned that Subhas was leading a movement which would create a break from the Gandhian Congress, and that they couldn't support. So they went against Subhas. They didn't like it. Although, at the fag end of Subhas's career in India, sometimes towards the end of 1940, when he had chalked out everything about his escape from India, that time Jayaprakash Narayan wrote him a secret letter, which was handed over to him, admitting that Jayaprakash was wrong in reading the political environment and Subhas was right. So Jayaprakash offered that you were right, and so let's work together. But it was too late by that time. Now, Congress Socialist Party's position was that, and there was another funny thing about Congress Socialist Party. So when the Congress Socialist Party went against Subhas, the central leadership went against Subhas. Jayaprakash, Ram Manohar Lohia, Minu Masani, they were against him. But their provincial committees, they broke away with the central committee. So they were arguing that no, we need to support Subhas Bose in the struggle against the British imperialism, in his plan for winning independence. We need to stand by him. We need to support. So the Congress Socialist Party actually broke into many parts, and large number of people came over to Forward Bloc, so which was Subhas's party. So this was Congress Socialist Party. Now the Communist Party. The Communist Party, initially, the leader of the Communist Party of India, Manovendranath Roy, M.N. Roy, he worked in collaboration. He was very supportive of Subhas, and he was supportive of Subhas till about 1938, till about 1939. He was supportive. But the Communist Party, our Communist Party's ideological fathers, which was, I mean, the Communist Party, of course, was driven by the agenda set by the Comintern, the Communist International in Moscow. So they were not happy with Subhas's line of political thinking. And at the base of it, at the root of it, there was a very, very funny thing. They feared that with his radical thinking and his radical political line, Subhas was actually poaching onto their own constituency. So he was taking away the labor leaders, the student leaders. So he was trying to organize them, which was actually the role of the Communist Party. So the Communist Party was very annoyed and very, very cautious about him at that time, and they opposed him. And but they came together for a brief period. The Communist Party refused to join the Forward Bloc, which was not a party but a group, of a progressive group within the Congress. They said that we want to retain our separate identity, and as a result, they formed the Left Consolidation Committee. So was formed the Left Consolidation Committee. So the Communist Party joined there, but very soon there was a break, and they refused to support Subhas anymore towards the end of 1939, 1940, a clean break. And this break aggravated. So we find that P.C. Joshi, the leader of the Communist Party during the World War, when Subhas is in Germany and when he's making broadcasts from Germany, from Japan, and he's sending his men into India to organize the ground level revolutionaries and an uprising. We find that P.C. Joshi is going to the Viceroy, to the Intelligence Bureau chief, and reporting to them about the activities which Subhas's party was doing. So they were spying. They were spying and reporting, snitching on Subhas's party and his followers. And they, parallelly, they were running a vicious campaign against him. So they named him the running dog of Japanese imperialism, a stooge of Hitler, and so he will bring the Japanese into India and make India hell. So, and they called him all possible sorts of names. So they were completely against him. The Hindutvawadis, the Hindu Mahasabha, Subhas had very serious differences with Savarkar regarding his politics. So, he had a lot of respect as an individual. He had a lot of respect for Savarkar as an individual, but politically he was scathing in his criticism. But and it was returned by Savarkar. Savarkar didn't agree with many of the propositions of Subhas, and for a brief period they tried to bring up an alliance in particularly during the Calcutta Municipal Corporation elections of 1940. But that alliance didn't work, and it broke off. And after the alliance broke off, Subhas went and allied with the Muslim League. The Muslim League thought that they had got a great catch, and they were very overjoyed with it. They wanted to exploit Subhas's image and push their agenda. Of course, Subhas had a different point of view, and he was not in line, in sync with the separatists, the Pakistan propaganda. He was absolutely against it. He was absolutely against the communal divide. What he was trying to do at that time was to bring the progressive elements, which he called the progressive elements, in both Hindu Mahasabha and the Muslim League on a common plank. So he was trying to bring them into the mainstream. That was his thing. And Muslim League was viewing his joining the alliance from a different perspective. So looking at this was from a distance, and more objectively was the governor of Bengal. So we find in his note to the viceroy. I mean, it's quite amusing. He says that the Muslim League thinks that they have got Subhas in their grips, and they are very happy about it. But they have no idea what Subhas Bose can do to their party. He is such a slippery character that probably he will manage breaking them up. So while this was going on, Subhas was arrested and he had to leave the country. Now, from here, let us move to after independence. After independence, Subhas's popularity was sky high, and nobody came close to him. So everybody had to pay at least lip service. The communists had to show their respects. The Gandhians, including Mahatma Gandhi himself, had to show him his respects. Pandit Nehru, Patel, everybody, Hindu Mahasabha, of course, I mean, after Subhas left the country, Hindu Mahasabha was never critical. They never said anything harsh or critical about him. Rather, very strangely, when it was known that he had left the country, Savarkar issued a public statement that wherever he is, the good wishes of the countrymen are with him and let him succeed in his mission. So it was a very warm kind of statement, and no other political party talked in that tone at that time. It was only Savarkar who said that, despite their political differences. They were politically different, but despite their differences. So Hindu Mahasabha was also supporting Subhas Bose. Muslim League, of course, wanted their share of the pie, so they jumped in. They said that okay, we will defend the Muslim soldiers of the INA, and the Muslim soldiers of the INA refused. Even Shahnawaz Khan was, of course, at the center stage of the trial in the Red Fort trials, and he refused help from Muslim League. So after independence, Subhas's popularity was such, nobody could ignore him, and at the same time, nobody could forget the bitter past. So they were not in a position to take him in, absorb, co-opt, or appropriate fully, and they could not also ignore him, because you ignore him at a great political cost. People of the country at the mass level were worshipping him, so you could no, he could not be ignored. So he became a thorn in their throat. So they couldn't take it out, they couldn't swallow it. And that set the tone, and that has continued till today. So there is a lot of criticism against BJP now, that BJP is the Hindutva camp is trying to appropriate Subhash Bose. Yes, probably it's a correct interpretation, but I don't see anything wrong in that, because when the Congress say that Subhash Bose was a congressman and they start praising him, that is another kind of appropriation, because Subhash was kicked out of Congress, and he was very strong in his utterances against the policies of both Nehru and Gandhiji. So and when the left front, of which are revamped, changed, forward bloc is a component of constituent of the left front. When the left front start worshipping Subhash Bose, they tend to forget. They have issued a very convenient apology that our assessment of Subhash Bose at the time was wrong, so we said the wrong things. But their reservation against Subhash remains the same. Political reservation remains the same. So you see, all the political groups, they are eulogizing him, they're praising him, they are trying to utilize him, exploit his image as much as possible, but they will not rehabilitate him to that place. They will not give him the honors that he deserves. So that is why Subhash Bose still remains in the fringe. He has been marginalized, sidelined. The mainstream political discourse of India has included the thoughts and words of Nehru, Gandhi, Patel, Ambedkar, even Jayaprakash Narayan and Lohia. But Subhas is missing, and he was an extremely erudite and uh, well-read, well-informed person with a great foresight. So, what could have been the reason? The reason is this: that he was inconvenient to everyone. It suited everybody's purpose to keep him on the sideline, never let his troublesome, radical ideas come onto the mainstream, and because that would disrupt their group thinking, their group ideologies, and it was safer and it was better for everyone to pay respects, to show, issue a stamp now in commemoration, or do a function in Red Fort. Do those. I mean, that doesn't harm anything. That doesn't harm anybody. You show people that you are remembering Netaji. People are happy. Parties are happy. But the real thing remains unsaid and undone. So that's the reason why I wanted to bring out this aspect as crudely as possible, as bluntly as possible. That's why I use the name Inconvenient Nationalist.
There's a lot to unpack in what you have just said. So let me start with constituency. You said something very interesting, that Nehru had a constituency, Patel had a constituency, Gandhi had one, but Bose did not have any. And in the past, on my podcast, etc., I've spoken about this, that a leader must have a constituency. Without a constituency, you are not a leader. So
Correct.
it looks like people like Gandhi and Patel and etc. They had these sections of Indian society that formed their constituency.
Correct.
Whereas it looks like for Bose, the whole of India was this constituency, and maybe that's the reason why he was so popular after 1947 when he had already disappeared. So, do you think that it is the reason, the because he had no section of Indian society as his constituency? Is that why he was inconvenient to everybody? Because they were all in some way serving somebody or other, which was at a sub-national level. Is it? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, actually, what I'm trying to say is that he his constituency, so to speak, were the youth and the students, and he started organizing them right from 1928, after he was released from his first phase of exile. When he came back from the Burmese prisons, he started organizing the students and the youth, and this worried the British government. So we see secret notes being issued by the governor of Bengal, by the viceroy, and they're saying that, and at that time they are putting Nehru and Subhas in the same bracket. They're saying that the viceroy at the time, Lord Irwin, is writing that for the first time, independence, the word independence has transcended, crossed that boundary of being a mere word. Subhas and Nehru mean action. They are not just speaking words. So Subhas was constantly organizing student and youth community across the country, throughout the country.
Mm.
And this was not taken well either by the British government or by the Gandhian High Command. They had their own, because here I want to bring in another hypothesis that I have is uh, I'll come to it later. Maybe we should take it up separately. It demands some discussion. Uh, so what Subhas was doing is he was playing around with organizations. He was with the Hindustan Republican Army. He was collaborating with the Hindustan Socialist Republican Army. First, the HRA of Sachindranath Sanal, then HSRA of Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, Rajguru. He was collaborating with the Naujawan Bharat Sabha. So all these organizations in Bengal, of course, there were the Anushilan Samiti, the Jugantar Dal, and these were the big ones. There were many smaller ones, of course. There were the Bengal Volunteers, which became a very, very dedicated and loyal group of revolutionaries loyal to Subhash. And then there was a Dhaka group of Sri Sangha, and the most of these radical revolutionary groups were based in Eastern Bengal, and some of them in Punjab, some of them in United Provinces, towards and of course Western India, in Maharashtra and Central Provinces. Subhas was very active. He moved towards the southern part of the country a little later when he became the president. That's when he started focusing towards that part of the country, and so he was trying to gradually build up, not as his not groups, not as his followers, but as uh, as as uh, as an organization with so he looked at it like an army. So there would be an army with divisions, battalions. So he was organizing like that, and his idea was that when they are prepared and the time comes, they should rise in unison, they should rise together. And that uprising, if that happens, then the British Raj will not be able to survive even for a minute. So there was a little bit of conflict with the revolutionaries who were taking up, say, acts of terror, which of the language of those years, the acts of terror. I mean, violence, sporadic violence. So killing somebody, a district magistrate or a judge. So these kind of killings were going on, and Subhas had a lot of respect and admiration for these people, lot of respect and admiration for the sacrifice that they had shown. But he, from the 1930s and late 1920s and early 1930s, I see that he is trying to get them work in a different, along a different line. He was at that time in public meetings. He is constantly telling them. So these are the aspects that have never been brought out actually. So he was telling them that look, a revolution in a country like India is not possible with one pistol and one and a half bombs. You can kill a few people here and a few people there, but that is not going to give you freedom. Rather, the repercussion, the backlash is going to be severe. So don't waste your strength by trying to kill one person here, one person there. Rather, organize yourself, train yourself. And this training in military discipline, in the first sign of this came in the 1928 Congress, annual Congress in Calcutta, where Subhas organized a band of volunteers, a corps of volunteers, which were dressed in military uniform. He himself, as the general officer commanding, so that he took that title on himself, general officer commanding of the volunteer corps, and uh, that military discipline, that military ethos, that was so clear and marked that it annoyed the hell out of Gandhiji. He couldn't stop criticizing and saying the nastiest of things about that show, that exhibition of military ethos. So he went ballistic against it. But that was the beginning, and that continued from 1928. It continued. So small groups were being organized. They used to do route marches across cities, uh, throughout the provinces, and they would be given training. There would be secret cells who would plan. There were so many revolutionary groups. So and they were, unfortunately, they were also fighting against one another. so in Bengal, the most unfortunate thing that happened was that the two big revolutionary parties, the Anushilan Samiti and the Jugantar Party, they were against each other, and one party chose Subhash Bose and another party chose his rival Congress candidate Jatindra Mohan Sen Gupta. So they couldn't come together. So Subhash was also one of the reasons why he could not build a constituency, is that while he was doing all these things, he was also having to deal with the internecine conflict, the fight between factions. So that was he needed time for that, and he didn't get enough time because in 1930 he was thrown in jail, 31 he was thrown in jail, 32 he was arrested, and 33 he was sent to exile for the next 4 years. So and before that, as he was starting his political career, he was arrested in 1924 and kept in prison without any charge, without any trial, till middle of 1927. So, there was no other political leader of his stature who was treated like that. Jawaharlal Nehru was never put under such conditions. He was never sent to exile. Gandhiji was never done. Patel was never sent to exile, because the British government knew who they were dealing with. They knew where the threat was coming from. So this this unstructured organization that Subhas was grappling with, he really started devoting his energy in structuring it and bringing it together was from 1939, when he came out of Congress and started forming he formed the Forward Bloc. So he sent out his emissaries to different parts of the country, and very specific people. Of course, this was being done with great secrecy. And one of his old revolutionary associate went out, met Bhai Parmanand in Punjab, the Savarkar brothers, uh, uh, Golwalkar and had passed by that time. So all these people and the other revolutionaries, so he tried to bring all of them as a last ditch attempt in 1939. And this thing was gathering, and he was traveling to south at that time, and forming his organization, consolidating his organization there. And as this was building up, by mid 1940 he was again thrown to jail, and the war had started, and he saw that there was no way that he would be released as long as the war lasted. So he just left the country. Uh, so the that is one of the key reasons why he didn't have a constituency, because he started the process, he couldn't complete it. And and the pockets, his influence remained, but they didn't come together, it didn't gel together. So that was unfortunate for India, unfortunate for him. And it would have been a different story had he succeeded in bringing all the forces together.
So he was unable to, he was not afforded the time to be able to unify all of these disparate revolutionary
Correct.
forces together, right? So when
Yes.
you wear a uniform, a military uniform, and when you organize the youth in a military style, that is a direct challenge to the ruling order, which is the British. And
Yes.
so they must have seen him as the biggest threat. Now, Subhash Bose was unable to organize all of these disparate forces together because he was in jail, etc. But even the Congress party's leaders were in jail very often. So, how was the Congress party so well oiled, well unified? What was the unifying factor there, which Subhash Bose was not able to have?
One thing, that's a very good question. How did they do it? Because first thing is that before Subhas or leaders of his generation came into the national uh, arena, Gandhi had established his supremacy, and he had built a second rung team. So in 1924, for example, if you see who are the key leaders coming up in Bengal, it is Subhas Bose and Jatindra Mohan Sen Gupta. Of course, Chittaranjan Das is still alive, and he is at par with Gandhi at that time. Chittaranjan, Motilal Nehru, Gandhi, they are at par. So they are the top national leaders. And under them, Motilal is aligned with Chittaranjan Das at that time. So, and Motilal is aligned with Chittaranjan Das, but Jawaharlal is aligned with Gandhi. So there is a dichotomy there. Gandhi had been able to build his second rung very efficiently. And who are these leaders? They are Rajagopalachari, they are Sardar Patel, there's Gandhi, and there is Nehru, and these are very high quality leaders. So the Gandhian program, Kripalani is there. The Gandhian program, even if Gandhi is in jail, which he was in 1922, he was thrown in jail. Uh, but Gandhi's being in jail does not stop the Gandhian machinery, because he had successfully created that machinery. So there is Sardar Patel is taking the movement forward. Pandit Nehru, although he is aligned with Subhas in terms of uh, life's outlook, philosophical outlook, uh, the modern outlook, a scientific modern outlook, and uh, ideas, economic and social ideas, he was in the Gandhian camp, because he would never ditch Gandhi. He would break with Subhash, but he would not break with Gandhi. So for him, Gandhi's personality was much more important than the ideal, than the ideas that which he subscribed to. So he would subordinate his ideas and ideals to Gandhi's demands, Gandhi's program. So that was there. And Subhas, on the other hand, probably it was one of his weaknesses as a leader, where he was not able to replicate that model of that Gandhian leadership, and it's a very modern management principle also. I mean, when you see succession is a very critical component of modern management. If there is a top leadership, the next level should be ready to take over when he hangs up his boots. So Gandhiji did that very nicely. Deshbandhu Chittaranjan did that very nicely. But Deshbandhu Chittaranjan's death was so unexpected and so sudden. It caught his immediate disciples unprepared. They were kind of splintered because Gandhi captured half of them. He took over Jatindra Mohan Sen Gupta and some of the other important leaders. They went into the Gandhian camp. Some of the Swaraj Party remained with Subhas, but and then the revolutionary groups which were supporting Subhas, they splintered. So and Subhas was wearing many hats at that time. So he was focusing on Calcutta Corporation and municipal governance. He was focusing on the proceedings within the assembly, legislative assembly, and he was focusing on the youth and the student communities, building them up. And at the same time, he was dealing with the Congress politics. He was a member of the working committee, so the overall Congress politics at the national level. So he was wearing too many hats. Probably he had too many balls to juggle with, and uh, that deficiency of not having an immediate second rung of leadership which would take his agenda forward and build that organization, which Gandhi could, which Deshbandhu Chittaranjan could. That probably was one of his weaknesses, why he could not do that, which the Gandhian High Command could. So it's a very well-oiled machinery in the Gandhian High Command, the Gandhian group, where there was no parallel institution on Subhas's side. And so that's a good point, and that is something that is probably one of his few weaknesses.
Is it really a weakness? For instance, Gandhi was afforded the time by the British to build his entire team. It appears to me that like the British were kind of sympathetic towards Gandhi and the Congress Party, the moderates, so to say, and Subhash Bose was more of an extremist. He sought an overthrow of the British, and that's why he did not get the kind of traction. He was not allowed the kind of traction that maybe
Yeah,
people like Gandhi would.
that's true. That's right. I mean, I am being harsh when I say that it was his weakness. I am being harsh critic, and on every parameter, I'm being harsh than I should be. But because uh, I am his biographer, so I can't be seen to be biased towards him. So it was a deficiency. It was a deficiency, no
Hmm.
doubt. But you are very right in saying that Gandhi was given the time and space. So even when he was in jail, he was given all the facilities. The jail terms of Subhas Bose were extremely harsh, and 11 times he was thrown into jail and put in very uh, difficult conditions, because of which his health suffered. His health suffered a lot. His health suffered while he was in the Burmese prison. His health suffered while he was in Indian prisons. He was beaten up. Show me, I mean, if Gandhi was ever beaten up by the police officers, if Nehru or Patel was ever beaten by the batons, the police beating him up with the baton. He's taking a procession. The mounted police comes and hits on his head with the baton. He falls down in the jail. He is thrashed by the Afghan police officers or the Punjabi police officers. So that kind of treatment, that harsh treatment, was never meted out to any of the top Gandhian leaders. Never. They have been there to the prison for extended period, yes, but not as much as Subhash, and not certainly not in those harsh conditions. And these two exiles, 24 to 27, 3 years, and 33. I would say 32 because he was thrown to prison in 32, very early 32, beginning of 1932. So 32 till 37 when he was released, 5 years. So 5 years here, 3 years there, 8 years. His and then last 6 months put another, I mean, cumulative time of all his other imprisonments, take another year and a half. So out of his political career in India of say 24 years, nearly 10 years have gone to prison. So he is left with only 14 years, and then that is a much shorter period of time which he had compared to most of the other top leaders. And so, I mean, again, that was of deficiency of time was of course there. But again, I mean, when you look at Patel is relatively easier for him to organize his community, drive a specific uh, uh, agenda and satyagraha. He is leading the Bardoli satyagraha, and he comes to national fame, and he comes to light national fame. Mahatma Gandhi picks him up, puts him in the national stage. Jawaharlal Nehru is Mahatma Gandhi's disciple, even when Motilal Nehru is against Gandhiji's views. So Gandhiji has chosen Jawaharlal Nehru to project him. So, on the contrary, if you look at Subhas Bose, he is always the bad boy. He is fighting with Gandhi. He is fighting with the Gandhians. He is siding with Deshbandhu Chittaranjan. And so obviously he is never the choice. He is never. Gandhi comes to terms with Subhas's politics somewhat in 1929, when after all the arguments and altercations and bitterness, 1929, 1930, he says that, well, let's not allow bitterness to creep into our relation. Let the differences be there. Let the arguments happen. But I would like to know more about you. It would be sad that if I feel that I don't know the youth of Bengal today. I adore the youth of Bengal. So, and Gandhi is constantly trying to put Subhas as in the shoes of a Bengal leader, whereas he is at the same time saying that it is Jawaharlal who should be at the helm of the Congress, because Motilal was pushing Jawaharlal to be the president of Congress in 1927. Gandhi was pushing Jawaharlal to be the president of Congress in 1928. And finally, Jawaharlal becomes the president in 1929. And in 1929, how did he become the president of Congress? Because the nominations used to come from the provincial Congress committees. And the overwhelming vote for that year was for Gandhiji, 1929 Lahore Congress. And in Bengal, what happened? Subhas Bose got more votes than Gandhiji. So that was also a factor. I mean, even in 1929, so the story that we know that Subhas defeated Gandhi's candidate in 1939, that same thing had happened 10 years ago. So by that time, Subhas had taken over Gandhi in Bengal in terms of popularity and in terms of his appeal of his political program. So, but then Jawaharlal is not in the picture in 1929. What Gandhiji does is he says that I think Jawaharlal is the best candidate. Nobody comes close to him in terms of qualification, and he should be the president. Jawaharlal himself wrote in his autobiography later that I was not at all happy with the way I was pushed into the presidency was thrusted onto me. It was thrust onto me. But but then I always agreed with what Gandhiji said, so I took it on. So that's how one group, Gandhi was nurturing his second rung. He was looking for their development, bringing them up, and at the same time taking good care that uh, the indisciplined and troublesome Subhas remains kind of subdued and does not get into the center stage. So that factor is also there. So it was not only the deficiency of his leadership uh, style, but the time that he got, the treatment by the British, the treatment by Gandhi himself and the Gandhian High Command. So all these factors contributed to his not being able to build his constituency.
So it's clear that there was a very wide difference between the vision that Gandhi had for the politics of India and what Bose had. So what was the vision that Bose had for India, and what how was it different from the vision that Gandhi had for India?
Yeah, this is where I come back. I will come back to the point which I had stopped talking about a few minutes ago. So this is a framework which it came to my mind, and this is a kind of a different framework than the professional and traditional historians. So I started looking at the immediate objective of the freedom fighters, of our nationalist leaders, top leaders. I mean, I'm not demeaning anybody, or I'm not showing anybody down, but I'm assessing them from the perspective of their immediate objective. So, what was Mahatma Gandhi's immediate objective? What was his ultimate goal? His immediate objective, his goal, was to transform humanity. It was not to win India's independence. The goal of Subhas Bose was to win India's independence. It was not to transform humanity. So that is a fundamental difference, which gave rise to all other differences. And as far as personality is concerned, Subhas Bose and Mahatma Gandhi were as different as any two human beings on this earth can be, in terms of their social background, cultural background, educational upbringing, uh, the breadth of mind, their treatment of religion in their lives, everything, take everything, any factor, they were completely different. But in the public life, in political life, the difference started from here. That Gandhi's aim and objective was to transform humanity, and Subhas's objective was to win India's independence. If you look at other figures, like say Jawaharlal Nehru's objective was also to win India's independence. But he would, as I said, he would give up his principles and ideals when he came into a clash with Gandhiji. So he would talk a lot, he would write a lot, say radical things, but when it came to the time for voting or deciding a camp, he would always go back to Gandhiji's words. And he has himself admitted it number of times in his own autobiography. So these are not my words, these are his own words. Patel's immediate objective, if you see, was more about organizational uh, goal. So his thing was strengthening the Gandhian Congress. Obviously, it was India's freedom was there. I mean, who didn't want India's freedom? Everybody wanted India's freedom at that time. Even the liberal leaders wanted India's freedom. So, but the difference was always what kind of freedom. What was the definition of Swaraj? The word used conveniently at different points of time by almost everyone. So Swaraj sometimes meant dominion status. It sometimes meant some sort of extra power given to Indians in the Viceroy Executive Council or in the ministries. And sometimes it meant, whenever it was convenient, it meant freedom, complete independence. For Subhash, it was always complete independence. For Jawaharlal, it was always Indian independence. And knowing that, he agreed to dominion status, which was a betrayal of his own ideals. So, so the difference between Subhas and Jawaharlal Nehru was that primarily this difference, that both had the same ideals. But whereas Subhas stuck to his principles and his ideals, Nehru stepped back and actually betrayed his own principles and ideals. He chose something else over his own belief. That was the main difference. Patel, as I said, was mostly organizational. He was more about maintaining discipline in Congress, maintaining a very strong iron grip over the other leaders, provincial leaders, and ensuring that Congress remains Gandhian. So these are the goals and the objectives which differentiate. It helps you understand the actions of these people over an extended period of time, and that uh, difference. So I mean, even if I come to something as personal as religion, so religion is both personal and public. But Gandhi's religion is more theoretical. He's explaining Gita, Srimad Bhagavad Gita in his own manner. He's interpreting as a modern day prophet religious principles, spiritual principles. He is saying that if I have to go against Sri Krishna, I would go against him. If he believed in violence, I would go against him. So non-violence is his world. He is not. He's so dogmatic about it. He's unable to think or look beyond it. Subhash, on the other hand, religion clearly had two aspects: personal and public. So his personal spiritual practice was practice driven. He went deep into sadhana from his student days. It was completely the path of sadhana that he chose. So he would meditate, he would read up about tantra, he would do puja, different methods of sadhana. He would learn about them, practice them, and it went on. So whenever he was in jail, his own cell would all one corner of his cell would always be covered by curtain. That used to be his puja room. That was he would worship there, and nobody else was allowed entry there. And that was a constant feature from beginning to the end. And even when we see when the war is going on, I mean, cities are being destroyed, uh, planes are bombing cities, people are dying. Even then, he would take out time at the midnight to wear a saffron robe, go to the Ramakrishna mission and meditate for hours. So he would always carry a small copy of Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Rudraksh Mala with him on his body all the time. That sadhana driven. I mean, his view, his idea, his perspective on religion was driven or was based on sadhana, on practical application, not theoretical. But in the public life also, he would take a very stringent stand, although he was a very secular leader, which Congress loves to talk about now. But today's secularism is miles apart, hundreds of miles apart from the secularism of Subhas Bose. Subhas Bose would never hesitate to take a very strong stand on his own religion. So in Mandala, we see that he is leading the prisoners there in a hunger strike against the policy of the Burmese government and the Bengal government for not allowing Durga Puja or Saraswati Puja, not paying for it. He says that you are giving allowance to the Muslims, you are giving allowance to the Christians, and when it comes to my Hindu religion, you are taking a biased view. You are trying to suppress our religious practices. So he would take a public stand. Same thing happened in Alipur jail. He would say that I will do Durga Puja. This is Durga Puja time. It's my right. It is my religious freedom, my right. I will do Durga Puja. So the government would have to bend down every time. He would create a ruckus. So it's not as if I mean he was not like a modern secular leader who would cringe or who would shy away from proclaiming his Hindu identity. He was very proud Hindu, and a number of times, all the time, he would say, tell everybody in all his speeches that especially to the youth and the students, that you have to be rooted in your past. If you forget your heritage, if you forget your history, your glorious past, if you stop feeling proud of your past, of your history, then you will never be able to build the future of your country, because you will be completely uprooted. You will not know what nationalism means. Nationalism for him was not the sectarian, bigoted, narrow uh, ideology which, as it is portrayed today. For him, nationalism was Satyam Shivam Sundaram. It's the truth, it's beneficial to everybody, and it's beautiful. So it's broad, wide, all encompassing, and there is nothing narrow about it. So that was his view of nationalism. So all these views, and you would say that India has a mission. India has a mission for the world. And here he would take great pride in saying that so many ethnicities, so many religions have come together in this country. It's like a melting pot. And it is the challenge for us to create a model in front of the entire world for them to follow. That despite so many cultures, despite so many religions, despite so many different strands of thought, we can amalgamate everything. We can create an ambience, a country where all these are in harmony. In terms of religious rights, he would say that religious rights, obviously, he believed, and that was somewhat political, that the British were mainly responsible for Hindu-Muslim riots. But apart from that, he would also say that Hindus don't know enough about Islam, and Muslims don't know enough about Hinduism. Same for Christians. They don't know about the other religions. So, if India is to develop as a composite country, each person of different religions have to know intimately about the other religions, and that only that would bring in genuine respect and feeling. And if there are differences, once you know each other intimately, those are differences that you can sort out. And it was not, again, just like his religious uh, uh, I mean approach was different from Gandhi's. It was not theoretical, it was practical. He applied this principle, and it was seen in both in Europe, where he set up the Free India Center, and in Southeast Asia, where he set up the Azadin government and the INA. It was He applied the principle. Nobody ever had any religious problem. Nobody religion was never an issue. Common kitchen, the practice of the British Indian Army of having separate kitchens, uh, untouchability, all these were demolished, and nobody, not a single person, had any problem with that. That was unthinkable at that time. That the magnitude, the scale of that achievement, everybody had to acknowledge. And Nehru used this example even when he became prime minister. For many years after his prime minister, he became prime minister. That if Subhas Bose could do it, why can't we do it? Why are we not able to do it? So this was a challenge. I mean, this is something he did, achieved the unthinkable. And so these all these were very basic and fundamental differences with Gandhi and with the Gandhian camp. Of course, there were also political and petty political issues, the issues of retaining power in a small group, in a small coterie. That's why the high command. Uh, those were there, but there were very, very fundamental differences.
It's very interesting to learn about his religious observances, which I was not really that much aware of, despite him having this image of being a secular leader. So, if he was such a staunch Hindu, why was there this rift or these differences between Subhash Bose and the Hindu Mahasabha, between him and Savarkar, etc.? What was the cause for that?
He never really had much of a problem with the Hindu Mahasabha as an organization. He said that he always acknowledged the Hindu Mahasabha represented the interests of the Hindus, particularly in Bengal when there was a very strong Islamist and fanatic fundamentalist government uh, who were trying to uh, enact laws or were pursuing policies which were communal. And he acknowledged that the Hindu Mahasabha was doing good work. He was never hesitant to acknowledge the fact that the Congress movement were uh, driven initially, and I mean, it generated through the Bengali Hindu Bhadralok. So they were the pioneers, but he had a problem in using religion for electoral politics. And that is where the clash with Shama Prasad Mukherjee and Savarkar happened. That was one of the issues why they differed. He said that you cannot use religion for election purposes. I mean, of course, there are communal issues, there are communities, their welfare have to be looked after, and their interests have to be represented, but not in this manner. Don't bring religion into politics. That was his prime point of difference with the Hindu Mahasabha. And the other thing, when before leaving the country, he went and met Savarkar in Pune and tried to explain to him that, drop the communal point of view. Let's build a broad, a mass platform and take the campaign forward. Let's work towards the uprising that he had been planning. And he wrote later in the second volume of his political treatise, The Indian Struggle, that he was very, very dissatisfied, unhappy, and very frustrated. He said that Savarkar lacked the uh, understanding of global politics, the broad global politics. He was His only concern at that point was to get Hindus recruited into the British Indian Army so that they can get military training, which they could utilize against the Muslims. So Subhas was very annoyed with this point of view. He said that's a very, very narrow and sectarian point of view. And the same thing he said against Jeddah. He said Jinnah is bothered only about Pakistan. That's his sole. He's not interested about Muslims. He is taking the help of the British. He's a stooge of the British, and the Muslim League is a party of the Muslim landlords, which are fed by the British Muslim landlords and capitalists, fed by the British imperialists. So they are unable to see the broad national picture. So these two sectarian points of view approach towards politics, he was against, and that was so. It was not in conflict with his worldview, where he was very sure and confident and proud of his own identity. So he didn't have to obliterate his identity to become a world citizen, and that was his one of his main big fights with Rabindranath Tagore. He was completely against the idea of the nomenclature given by Tagore of Vishwamanav, the universal global citizen, because his point of view was unless you are rooted, you cannot be floating around in empty space. You have to be rooted somewhere. You can be a global citizen only after you have known, absorbed, assimilated, and you are very proud of your own identity, and then you reach out. Don't You don't have to be narrow, but that does not mean that to become a global or universal citizen, you have to forget who you are. So there was a clash with Tagore also there. Of course, I mean, Tagore later on came to support Subhash in his fight against the Gandhian High Command. Uh, and there was a religious clash with Tagore also. Tagore was a Brahmo. His father was one of the founders of the Brahmo Samaj. So uh, it so happened that in City College in Calcutta, which was owned by the Brahmos, it was a Brahmo institution. The Hindu students who were in majority, they wanted to do Saraswati Puja, and the college authorities forbade them. They said that you cannot. This is a Brahmo institution, and you cannot do Saraswati Puja. So the students anyway went ahead and forcibly did the puja, and Subhas sided with the students. He said that this is religious freedom. If they want to do the puja, why stop them? They're worshipping their goddess of learning, and that created a lot of rift and bitterness with Tagore because Tagore thought this was sacrilege and it shouldn't have been done. Subhas thought this was perfectly normal in a multi-religious country like India, and nobody should be stopped from following their religion. So that was another clash. That was in the late 1920s, 1928, 29, and so I mean, at various points, he was a very uh, kind of stickler to his ideals. He never compromised, and that is another. I mean, in their own words, where Gandhiji says that I am a man of compromise, and Subhash Bose writes that for me, compromise is sin. So that defines the differences between the two men. I mean, in as starkly as possible.
Right. So there's another aspect that we should talk about. So Subhash Bose is termed as an Axis collaborator, as a Nazi collaborator, somebody who allied with Hitler. So the question is, why did he ally with Hitler? Was he just because being pragmatic? Did he know about what was happening with the Jews, or was it so? So what's the reason why he did that?
Well, first thing is you have to remember that Subhas was in exile in Europe from 1933 till 1936 when he forcibly came back, defying the British ban. And it was in 1933 that Hitler came to power. So it is just a few days before Subhas sets his feet on European soil that Hitler had come to power. So he saw the rise of Hitler while being in Europe. He kind of formed relations with the National Socialist Party top leaders. And of course, he was also given a good reception by the Roman government, by Mussolini and his government. And he was given very high status by them. He was treated very well everywhere he went, and given special treatment. And he saw the movement very close, from very close. And that's when he formed, I mean, kind of consolidated his views on fascism or Nazism, on the authoritarian political schools of thought. And there were certain aspects which he admired, particularly the military discipline. He was a stickler for discipline, and he thought if India had to progress rapidly in a country which is marred with poverty, lack of healthcare, lack of education, lack of infrastructure, lack of industry, the first thing to prepare the country for democracy was to inculcate that sense of discipline, without which he predicted that it would be a chaos. It would the democratic model would be a failure. So he wanted that sense of discipline to be transferred into his own political ideology, which he wanted for India. Now, having said that, he was also very, very keenly aware of the racist nature of these regimes. So in Germany, we see that he was constantly trying to come to rescue of the students there who were being harassed for their uh, color of their skin, for their being Indians, for their dark skin. And he would take up the issues with the authorities, write letters to them, representations to them in the strongest possible language. And while coming back, while leaving Europe, or just after coming back, he writes to one of the senior officers of the National Socialist Party, a post holder, saying that I'm sorry to say that your government is nothing but a narrow, bigoted, racist government. And there is no way that we can support these things. What you do in your country, within your country, is your business. We are not bothered about it. But if you show this attitude to our Indian students there, then there is a big problem. Because in global relations, in international relations, if all that matters to us is how you are looking at us and what kind of support and benefit you are going to give to us. If there is any suffering of our students, of our people in your country, then nothing is going to work. And then in 1938, he puts down his postulate, his political thought very, very clearly. Very clearly. He says, again, he says that whatever is happening inside any country is their domestic business. It is not our business. Our interest is to make India free. That is our goal. It India has to realize that her interest comes first. So that principle uh, kind of uh, worked uh, as a deciding factor that he would collaborate or he would take help from the Axis bloc. But then let's look at how it happened. By 1939, when he has formed Forward Bloc and the World War has started, Germany, Italy are looked upon in India by Indian intellectuals as aggressors, as a racist regime, as dictators, and they are being severely criticized. Subhash's own paper, his party's organ was also called Forward Bloc, is critical about them, about their policies. He is criticizing the Japanese government, he is criticizing the German government, he is criticizing the Italian government. But he, at the same time, is admiring the progress in military technology that they had achieved. And he is like a politician who is a statesman who balances positives and negatives. He sees that there is an opportunity. If the Germans and Italians have made such progress in military technology by which they are able to beat the British, then there is something that India can look up to. India can benefit from that. But in 1939 also, I mean, and that's also a period when it is now widely known that the Germans, the Nazi regime is torturing Jews. The gas chambers and the things, all the mass murder, genocide are to begin later, and whatever killings are not going on, planning is going on. Those are not known to the outside world. Okay, but enough news is coming out that the Jews are being tortured and persecuted. So, Subhash is himself protesting against that, and he happened to make a friend, a Jewish friend of a Jewish couple in while living in exile. So, her name was Kitty Kuti. She was studying, I mean, at that time in Germany, I think in Vienna or in Berlin. I don't remember exactly. I have to check. But then they develop a very close and fond relationship with the husband wife, the couple. So I suppose develops a very close relationship. So he advises the Jewish couple that this is a monstrous uh, regime. Don't take any chance. Don't take any risk. There are better opportunities. You move to the US. You go over to the US. You don't need to stay here. But then when he is confronted by the couple that why are you uh, being nice with the National Socialists, with the Nazis? Why are you trying to get their help? Why are you trying to build support for Indian cause, Indian freedom amongst the current German government? You know they are racist. He says that look, the choice for me is very clear because the British government, which is ruling my country, is no less monstrous. They are killing millions of people. They are torturing millions of people in the jails. They are doing exactly the things which the German government is doing to the Jews. But because it's a different country, it's a different government, different people, that publicity, that propaganda is not building up. But for my country, they are facing this, my countrymen are facing the same treatment as the Jews are facing here. So for me, my priority is to save my countrymen, to liberate my country. That is my first goal. So that again, as I said, he explains that in his presidential speech in the Haripura Congress of 1938, and then finally he leaves India and goes over to Germany. But the question is, did he want to go to Germany at all? The evidence, all evidence, points out that he had no plans to go to Germany. He had planned. Subhas Bose was a planner. He was a meticulous planner. He never did anything that was rash or on the spot or driven by impulse. He planned his activities meticulously. So he left India in January 1941. And this exit he had started planning in 1939, November, December. So more than 1 year he had been planning what to do. After the World War has started, he is looking for international collaborators. He is looking who is going to help India. How can we utilize the international situation? Because he's constantly telling Gandhiji, let's start the satyagraha, let's start the mass movement. And Gandhiji is saying that we are not ready. Indians are not ready for a mass movement because we are not non-violent enough. Until the time uh, Indians, every Indian become non-violent, they cannot be a satyagrahi. So there is no question of satyagraha. And Gandhiji uses the term, uh, which I'm forgetting. It's a term from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which which says that a man is so evenly balanced in his worldview that nothing perturbs him, nothing disturbs him. He is equanimous and and like a high level spiritual person who can look at everything very evenly with no disturbance in the mind. So every Indian would have to reach that stage, and then only we can tell the British to leave their country. We can do the satyagraha. And Subhas says this is madness. This is madness. And while Gandhiji is preaching this principle to Subhas, he is doing all the kind of stuff to make sure that Subhas is driven out of the party. He is sidelined, cornered, all sorts of mean political, uh, uh, steps that he would take. So Subhas is seeing that he is fighting against the Gandhian High Command. He is trying to build up the mass movement that he wants. That work is going on, and he's trying to figure out how to get international collaboration with the powers that are fighting against the British. So at three fronts, he is working at that time. Unfortunately, he is thrown to jail in 1940 July, the beginning of July, and then there is nothing that he could do. But before that, he had sent people uh, through two routes to Russia. One route, he wanted to test out which are the best routes, which is the best route available to reach Russia. One was through the South China Sea, through the coast, Chinese coast, and then you go to Russia. The other route was through Northwest Frontier Province, Afghanistan, and then you enter Russia. So, with his supporters in the Northwest Frontier Province, who were aligned with the Communist Party at that time, they were leftists, but not part of the Communist Party. They were communist by ideology. So the Kirti Kisan Party, who they were developing uh, the mechanism for his exiting India. So one of them, or a couple of them, went to Russia, and one of them actually died while coming back. He was washed away by the current in the river when they were crossing the river into Russia. From Kolkata, he sends one of his close followers, Lala Shankar Lal, to Japan to meet the Russian ambassador there, to find out whether Russia would be interested in helping India, whether they would be receptive towards him. Shankar Lal goes to Tokyo, meets the Japanese ambassador, meets the German ambassador also. But Subhas's plan was always going to Russia. So he goes, even when he escapes from Kolkata, goes to Kabul, Peshawar, and then reaches the Kabul embassy. He gets no response from the Russian embassy because the Russians were not sure whether to let him in. They were not favorably inclined. For whatever reasons, they were not favorably inclined. But the Italians and the Germans, they opened the door for him. And once he's there, there is no question of coming back into India. So he grabs the opportunity. Whatever offer he gets, he grabs and goes through Moscow to Berlin. And he is prepared with his plan. Just think about it. He has left the country without any kind of organizational support, with the support of a few people of his forward bloc, but no big thing, no hype. Nobody knows him there. He has to impress every person. I mean, his of course his name is known, so that's why they would open the door for him. But he has to impress. Why would anybody take in Subhas Bose, who is leaving his country? What would they get? This is international politics. This is not charity. I mean, Italy and Germany were not sitting to do charity. They wanted something in return. This is because they saw in Subhas Bose a potential weapon to be used against the British. They were fighting against. So, but it didn't come easy. Subhas had to impress the ambassador, the in the German embassy, in the Italian embassy. He had to impress the foreign office. The very next day, the day after he reaches Berlin, the very next day he meets the foreign office officials, the officers there, gives his plan. They are impressed with his plan. Very soon he meets the German foreign minister, Ribbentrop. He gives his plan. Ribbentrop is impressed. So every step he goes, he is so uh, well articulated plan. He has developed it. By the time he is there, he knows exactly what he wants to do. So he didn't go there for ideological inclination. There was no ideological inclination towards the Axis bloc. He rather, when Germany attacked Russia, he was extremely scathing in his criticism, and he tells Ribbentrop on his face in the strongest language possible that you have done a blunder. the thing that you have done, it will turn India more against you. They will look at you as aggressors. Russia, Indian people are sympathetic towards Russia, towards the Soviet Union. And now you have attacked Soviet Union. Forget the war strategy part of it, the, the relevance of war strategy in it. Politically, this is a losing game. You have done a blunder. So he tells them on the face. I mean, nobody, if he was a sycophant, he could have got everything. I mean, much more than what he expected. But again, because he was nobody's man, he was his own man and had his own principles and thoughts and ideas in its own place and would stick to it. The German government, the Italian governments, they saw his value and they gave them every possible help. Same thing happens when he reaches Japan. Prime Minister Tojo refuses to meet him. By that time, he had met the chief of armed forces, he had met the foreign minister, he had met the defense minister, and they were so impressed by him. They cajoled Tojo to meet him for a brief few minutes. So Subhas Bose gets a few minutes to meet Tojo. And Tojo is not interested, just not interested. And he has had the bitter experience of the first INA breaking up, Rashbihari Bose and Mohan Singh falling out. And that bitter experience he has his mind. And he doesn't want to deal with another Indian. So Subhas Bose gets a few minutes. And within those few minutes, he comes out with a promise of unconditional help from the Japanese government. Tojo is so bowled over within those few minutes. He calls Subhas Bose a day later with his entire cabinet to discuss the plan for India's liberation. But that was the caliber of the man. He didn't have to be anybody's chamcha, anybody's sycophant, anybody's. He didn't have to belong to any camp because all his dream, all his passion was India. It was India first, India only, and India's liberation and reconstruction of India. Nothing else mattered. No political ideology mattered, no individual mattered, nothing else mattered.
So, what was this plan that he articulated to Ribbentrop and the Nazi leadership, and also to Tojo? And what value did they see in him?
The first value was that that a leader like Subhas Bose had come to seek their help. So publicity value, the great publicity value, that the Britishers, there is a top level leader from India who is in Berlin and talking to the entire world, telling what the Britishers are doing in India and that India wants independence. Publicity value. And Subhas Bose's plan was, it was a very detailed plan, but there were a few components which I will tell you. Is first, he wanted to create a base, build up a base in Afghanistan with the help of the German army and their technologically superior equipment and radio and tanks and everything. And he wanted to bring in the tribal forces in the Northwest Frontier province and to be ready as a launching pad to attack India. So the second part of it was to recruit the prisoners, Indian prisoners of war, and create the army in Europe, in the heart of Europe, which would come down with the German army and invade the British Empire, the British India, the British Raj through the Northwest Frontier province. Then the third was to, immediate goal was to set up a government in exile and a declaration from the Axis powers regarding India's independence, that India should be free and the British government needs to go. So these were the broad things that, and of course, there was a huge plan, a very meticulous and intricate plan of broadcasting. Because broadcasting played a very, very big role in reaching out to the Indian masses and creating discontent at the ground level. And it worked fabulously. And so when the Subhas Bose realized that the Germans were dragging their feet, Italians were relatively more helpful, more proactive, but Hitler was dragging his feet. And his uh, inner love for the British, his admiration, secret admiration for the British, he did not want to see the British Empire go in the heart of his heart. So he was dragging his feet, but he was giving at the same time all facilities that Subhas required. But the crucial things, that declaration of independence and the giving that technological support, that armed forces support for Subhas to bring the prisoners of war into India, he would not agree to that. He said that the war is going on; it's too far away. We are engaged in the Russian front, so we cannot look at that angle. Better you go to Southeast Asia. Japan has uh, done Pearl Harbor. They have taken over Singapore, and Southeast Asia is under Japanese control. You will be very close to your home and launch your campaign from Southeast Asia. So, and obviously, he made sure that Subhas was safely and securely transported to Southeast Asia. And when he came to Japan, he gave Tojo similar plan. That first thing, the first INA that was set up by Mohan Singh and Rashbihari Bose was looked upon as a subordinate army. First thing Subhas had to do was to get the status of an allied army. That we are not subordinates, we are independent, we are allied army, so give us the status of allied army. Second thing, he wanted to set up a free government of India in exile. And that was an unthinkable demand, but Tojo agreed to it. Third demand was even more ridiculous given that setting. He said, I want Indian territory which is under Japanese control. So give me the Andaman Islands. And the Japanese Navy leadership was mad. They were saying, what is this man talking about? But with his command over the political leadership in Tokyo, he extracted that also. So the Tojo agreed to give him at least the titular control of the Andaman Islands. And later on, when the people were leaving Burma and evacuating into India, leaving behind their property, the land. So whatever belonged to Indians, whichever land and property and everything belonged to Indians, those were given to the provisional government of the Azad Hind for uh, administering. So these were the things that he was doing. And when the INA fought with the Japanese army, they didn't fight as subordinate army. Subhas had to fight with at every level with the zonal, regional commanders of the army, Japanese army. That the India, the INA would be given the status of the Allied army. Uh, the Indian soldiers in the INA would be the first one to set foot on Indian soil, and as soon as some Indian territory is conquered, the INA, the officer corps, which was following the INA soldiers, they would set up the administration there. And the Japanese would be only as guards and soldiers. They would have no say in the administration of the territory. So these were very, very bold demands, and it talks a lot about the caliber of the man, that he could, under those adverse circumstances, he was. I mean, the Japanese government didn't have to listen to him, but they did. They gave him everything that he wanted. He wanted to set up a bank, the Bank of Asadin government. The Japanese government agreed. After grumbling and grudge, he agreed. Then he said, because we are an independent government, I am not going to deal with your local liaison agency. I want a proper diplomatic service. You set up you send an ambassador. You appoint an ambassador to my government. So the Japanese government had to appoint an ambassador to meet with the Azadin government. So it was he was treated as equal, and this something came out very nicely in an intercepted telegram, which uh, the Japanese ambassador in Berlin sent to Tokyo after Subhas Bose had left and come and set up his own government and the INA. So Hitler met the Japanese ambassador Oshima in Berlin and asked, how are things going? How is Bose doing in Japan, and how is the Japanese government treating him and all? So Oshima said in clear terms, and these were the exact words, that he has been given a blank check by the Japanese government. So that says everything. Whoever says that Japan would have come and captured India and India would have been hell, Nothing like that was even in the horizon. Japan had no plan for attacking India.
Now, as far as I know, Subhash Chandra Bose did not have any formal military training. So, how did he become the supreme commander of the Azad Hind Fauj? I mean, without training, and he did exceedingly well as the leader. So, how did a man without any formal training become the commander and a reasonably successful commander?
Well, he did get a training when he was
Mhm.
in Scottish Church College for a year, but that was a short training for a year. But he did get a training in the.
Okay,
At that time, what happened is that the Bengal regiment was being raised towards the end of the First World War, and Subhas wanted to join the army, that Bengal regiment, but he was rejected because of his poor eyesight. So he went and joined the India Defence Forces of the university branch of the India Defence Forces, and took proper military training for 1 year, and
I see.
that was his training. But again, he was a thinker. He was a military thinker by nature, inherently. He would read. He would, as I said, that he was probably the most erudite of all Indian political leaders of his time. The the expanse of his knowledge, information, reading, nobody came close. Probably Nehru, yes, but not even in that manner. The depth and the breadth of his knowledge and information, he was constantly voraciously reading. I mean, whenever he was sent to jail, uh, I mean, there were instances where in the Central Legislative Assembly, questions were being raised because some books he had asked for were refused. So he would send lists, huge, long lists, to his brother, to the libraries, that send me these books. I'm going to read. I'm going to study. So methodically he used to study. So obviously, I mean, part of a lot of it was theoretical, and he was a quick learner also, a very intelligent person. So he was a quick learner also. So he had people around him who could uh, give him the ideas, but I mean, whatever he could not learn from training. Obviously, he, as military strategy and everything, he gave a lot of independence and autonomy to his commanders. So it was not that he was a military dictator, that he would decide the strategy and tell them what to do. He would listen to them. He would take inputs from them, and as a person, he was extremely democratic, and he would take feedback. He would take criticism, and develop the plan along with them. So it was not that he was doing it alone.
And if he had won the war against the British and he had actually liberated India, what was his plan for India? Was he, like you said, he believed in democracy, but people allege that he was somebody with dictatorial tendencies. He wanted 20 years of dictatorship for India. So, what was his vision for India had he succeeded?
See, this 20 years of dictatorship for India is bunkam. It's a
Mhm.
propaganda by intellectuals aligned with the Congress party, because
Okay.
there is absolutely no source which says that he wanted a dictatorship for India for 20 years. Yes, he wanted a very strong central government, and he wanted the again for that discipline. His thing was there were too many vociferous separatist tendencies in India. So if the entire India, undivided India, was to be kept together, so there were separatist parties like the Muslim League. There were the princes who wanted their own kingdom, to retain the kingdom and keep with themselves, separate from India. If they were to be kept together, if the, as I said, the utter poverty, the abject poverty, the lack of education, of infrastructure, industry, uh, all these had to be taken care of. His uh, way of looking at it was a very strong central government uh, for a few years, which would be extremely disciplinarian in nature, and would uh, probably would mean as one party rule. One party rule, he explained that one party rule, it would be the Congress party. But Congress, since Congress had different uh, ideologies, different strands of thought, it would not be like the Communist Party dictatorship. So because there would be internal democracy within the Congress party, so the decisions would be made in consultation, in collaboration, and not by one single person. But with the provinces, over the provinces, the central government would have much more power for the probably for the first decade or so, or 15 years or so. Never specified the time period, but first few years, it would be a very strong central government. But at the same time, he also outlined uh, a very strong state-driven, state-controlled heavy industry development and cultural autonomy, regional autonomy, provincial autonomy, large degrees of autonomy for them. Nobody's freedom would be trampled upon. So a dictator doesn't give these assurances that nobody's freedom would be trampled upon. Every region, every ethnicity, every culture would have their own space and to develop and freely develop. So that would be there. And obviously, a strong military would be a very central component of his scheme. And he foresaw the INA as the core of the Free India's army that would drive. The British Indian Army had to be disbanded, and INA would be the core, and from there it would be built up. Exactly the opposite of what happened in Nehruvian India. The INA were shooed out, and the British Indian Army continued. So I mean, in a nutshell, those were his views, and the social evils like caste and all those things had to go. They just had to be abolished. uh, Scientific approach, scientific point of view, scientific view of the life, about social life. It had to be scientific. Though old, obscure, superstition-driven practices had to go, and divisions would have to be broken down. India would have to be a society where everybody is equal, and I mean, given the nature of his personality, when Subhash Bose said something, he meant it. Rather than words written on paper or words spoken, if he ever said those, unlike his contemporaries, he would make sure that those would be implemented. And 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 I have a feeling, it is my sense, Vijay, that probably one of the reasons why he was very carefully marginalized and sidelined was that uh, the Gandhian leadership, the Nehruvian leadership, or the post Gandhian leadership, had somewhere a fear that he might, if he comes back and takes over power, he might turn into a kind of a Robespierre in the Indian scenario, and that would put them in danger. So that kind of fear was there, unjustified, I would say, but probably that was because there would be no room for backroom compromises, and kind of Nehru's policies being decided or influenced by someone like Edwina, or that hunger for getting the power, that we have to, by hook or crook, we have to get the power in our hands. So the white sahibs being replaced by brown sahibs, all these things would have been done very, very differently had he come back. And that fear that he would come back was very real, was very real. And that is the reason why the government kept on snooping till the 1970s.
Right. So, my final question for today is: what do you see as the legacy of Subhash Chandra Bose? The true legacy.
The true legacy, I would say there are a few aspects of it, few strands of it. Firstly, as an identity as an Indian, uh, as nobody represents Indian nationalism the way he does, or as good as he does. Probably he's the finest uh, example of Indian nationalism, the best of Indian nationalism, and as an icon today, he stands tallest. And in every meaning of that term, from India's development to sense of identity to geopolitics, international relations, development of India's security system, the place of the army, the respect for the army, military thinking, strategic thinking, uh, taking forward scientific education, and uplifting every strata of our society. We talk a lot. We talk a lot. I mean, it's a matter of shame that from 1950 after and in 2022, we are still talking and talking and talking about poverty alleviation, improvement of agriculture, and we still don't have the solutions. I mean, so we have one person who had the foresight. I mean, in 1938, in his presidential address, he is talking about improving agricultural yield, crop yield. He is talking about removal of farmers' debt. I mean, we're still talking of those after 38, and this is nearly 100 years, 84 years. We're still talking of the same problems. I mean, that man could see those problems and had the vision to tackle those problems then. We are still grappling, we are still struggling. The other thing which I think is legacy is, and something that we have forgotten, is the politics of the language of politics. And here there are two very starkly different schools here. The Gandhian school, the language of politics, which is of the Gandhian school, and the language of politics of Subhas Bose. The Gandhian school's language of politics is marked primarily by circumlocution, beating around the bush. It's not only neither here nor there, it is both here and there. So you can shift your position very conveniently according to the situation. You can defend yourself wherever you are, whatever you do. People will never be able to understand what exactly you mean, what exactly you say, whether you mean what you say or what you say is what you are going to do. Subhas Bose's language of politics was very straightforward and honest, clear cut, to the point. So if he says that these are the things that we need to do, so he would not show overt friendliness to the British. That I am your friend, let us sit and talk, let us see how we can get independence. He is very clear that you are our enemy. भाई साहब पहले निकलो बाद में बात करेंगे, पहले तो आप निकलो यहाँ से. गांधीयन स्कूल इज, देखो हमें तो वो चाहिए, वर्ल्ड पीस चाहिए, हमें वो बनना है, वर्ल्ड सिटीजन्स, ग्लोबल सिटीजन्स बनना है, यूनिवर्सल सिटीजन्स बनना है. We have to transform humanity. So why don't we keep talking? Let's keep talking. Let the discourse go on. And then when the time comes, when we feel that everybody is ready, we are ready to take over and you are ready to leave, then we can work out a convenient mechanism. Very, very different language of politics, both have. So I feel that in the current uh, generation, in the current scenario of politics, that Subhas Bose's school, his language of politics needs to be brought back. We have seen too much of Nehruvian and Gandhian circumlocution, which practically means nothing.
All right. Thank you very much for a very interesting discussion. And congratulations once again on publishing the book. The link is in
Thank
the
you.
description. So I will urge all the viewers to go ahead and purchase the book. And I will do the same thing. So thank you so much, Chandrachur. Very nice talking to you. First time on the podcast,
Thank
and
you.
let's do this again. Do this again.
Thank you, Abhijit. Same here. It was great talking to you. We'll catch up again, surely, certainly.
Certainly.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Good
Thank you.
night. Good.
Good night.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Jai Hind.